In this tutorial, I'm going to show you some of the basics of using Camera Raw format from Adobe Photoshop Elements. So I'm going to choose my file here, an NEF file, raw file. And so this is what it looks like when it's first opened up. This is what it would look like if it was a JPEG as well, if I had not taken the picture in the raw format. So as you can see, it's not the greatest picture. There's not a lot of light. It's just a little bit washed out. So I'm going to take the opportunity to use Camera Raw to enhance it a little bit and show you some of the basics. So here's your temperature, tint. You've got all sorts of different settings here: exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, clarity, vibrance, saturation. And then on the next tab, you've got some sharpening and noise reduction tools that you can use. And this I basically keep the same unless you have something that you need to change for calibrating it. Okay, so I generally work within here the whole time. There's also other features: straightening. You can crop it here. You can work with your white balance here. That's a good idea too. A lot of different things you can do. I'm going to work primarily over here. And again, a lot of it is just everything is to your liking. So change it however you see fit. I'm going to change the temperature and just sort of get a feel for, what it can do. So the temperature, depending on your picture, if you've got a picture of a person, you might not want to change the temperature too much, but you might want to tweak it a little bit to get a better skin tone. A little warmer skin tone sometimes than what the camera gives you. Now in this case, this was a sunrise, so there was a lot more warmth that didn't really appear on the photo. So I'm going to just set it to about here. The tint I'm going to leave alone. I find the tint, sometimes you can tweak it a little bit, but it tends to go way off kind of quickly. If you double click on the little button here, it'll go back to what it was set at. So if you double click it, if you don't like what you've changed it to and you don't remember what it was at, just double click it, it'll go back. The exposure, if I go too high with the exposure, obviously it's going to be washed out. It's sort of a little washed out to begin with. So I could bring the exposure back a little bit. So that's back by one stop. Contrast, again, you'll see a big difference. Contrast to very little contrast. So I'm going to enhance the contrast a little bit. Now the highlights here, this is something I often work with as well. If you bring the highlights up, you'll see it'll just have a big glaring spot in the middle. I'm going to take some of the highlights down a little bit, get some of those tones that were there when I took the picture. And again, shadows, working with the highlights and shadows and the exposure, sometimes you can get a lot more range than what the camera was able to capture. So sometimes you actually want to darken up your shadows if I want it to be more contrasty. Other times you might need to take off some highlights and brighten some of the shadowed areas so you can see things. In this case, I'm going to leave it back so it's a little bit more of a silhouetted photo. Whites as well. You'll see it a little bit here. Okay, I'm going to keep that where it was. Blacks I could add, again, a little touch less of the black so they're a little bit darker, make the blacks blacker. Clarity. Some people like to use clarity here, some people don't. Some people prefer to be more specific and use it in Photoshop Elements itself, or you can specify where you want the clarity as opposed to using clarity across the whole picture. I'll just give you an idea. Okay, you can add a lot of clarity, make it really kind of rough looking, if you will, or you can soften it up. I'll just double click, put that back where it was. Vibrance, how vibrant the colors are in your photo. Again, you can take some away, almost make it completely desaturated, or you can add some in. Again, most of the time you don't want to add too much in, it begins to look very fake. Being a sunset, or a sunrise rather, you have a little play here. I might leave it about there. Same thing with saturation. Can desaturate it completely. Could leave a little bit of hint of color, or you could really make it have a lot of saturation. I might put that about there for now. Now, if you click into the Detail tab, that was the Basic tab, by the way, and if you go up here and click on what looks like little mountains, this is the Detail tab. And there's a bunch of different sharpening tools here. The main ones that I use is the sharpening, the amount, and the masking. Now you can, it's a good idea to come down here to the bottom left corner and go in, zoom in more, depending again on your picture. If it's a picture of a person, you might want to go in and zoom in on their face to make sure any changes that you're making, you're going to really see what effect it has. If you're zoomed out too far, you won't see, because you don't want to sharpen too much and end up being very pixelated, which can happen. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit more. Now to sharpen, one way that you can see the effect a little bit more is if you click on Option, hold down Option while you change the amount. It goes to black and white. You can often see the detail of the sharpening a little bit better when you're in black and white. So I might sharpen it up to about here. Again, you have to be careful, especially with people. You don't want to over sharpen your pictures. But something else I'm going to do, I'm going to go back and zoom out in this case so we can see the whole picture. Now for my masking, rather than sharpening everything about the picture, including the sky here, which you don't really need to sharpen, I'm going to come down to masking. Again, I'm going to click Option, and you'll see what happens. While I'm holding the Option key, I'm sliding the masking tool over. So at this point, it's sharpening everything in the picture. And as I slide this bar across, it's sharpening less and less. So really, I only want it to sharpen kind of the outlines of everything. That's where I want my sharpness. So I'm going to put the masking tool way up here. So it's really only sharpening all of the edges. It's not going to sharpen the middle of the sky where I might have some pixelation, and it'll make that pixelation worse. And that brings us down to noise reduction. I do have an ISO of 1250, which is a little high, so it's probably going to have some pixelation in my picture. We can zoom in and see some of that, especially right in here. Again, if I sharpen it, you'll see more pixelation. Okay, I'm going to take this back to about, I think I had it around 60. But if you do noise reduction, that'll take, if you do it to an extreme, you can see it takes away some of that pixelation. Now you don't want it to do that much luminance because it'll take away too much from your picture. But you can judge where it needs to be. So I might leave it right about here. It takes out some of that pixelation in the sky. Okay. Go back out. Oh, my zooming's a little bit slow right now. There. Back out to the whole picture. And so there, I've gone from a picture that was pretty washed out and not quite as clear, and I was able to add a lot more color back in and sharpen it up a little bit. Now from there I can go click on Open Image. I can either be done and leave that raw file alone, or I can click Open Image and that will open it up in Adobe Photoshop Elements. And then from there I can work in more detail. If there's certain areas I want to touch up with the Band-Aid tool, or if I want to enhance something even more, I can do it much more specifically rather than doing the entire picture. So let me just see if I can grab that file again. 56. Here's the JPEG. So here's what it was before, and here's how I was able to enhance it using Camera Raw. Okay, if I was to open up this JPEG and try and enhance it as a JPEG, I wouldn't get anywhere near the quality and the color tones that I can adjust using Camera Raw. So Camera Raw is a great feature to use if you know you might need to touch up your pictures. So much better than trying to work with a JPEG file. Subscribe to find more tutorials as they come out. Thank you.